Holder-Winfield. It strikes me that taking on something like the reform of education is such an enormously difficult task, in part because of local control, which Connecticut has cherished. And you come from a big city in New Haven that has seen some innovative programs, some of which have been a model for other cities. But as a person who is looking to make improvements and to diminish the achievement gap, you're dealing with 169 towns and cities, many of which have their own school system. How, as a legislator, do you begin to address that?
Now, that's an interesting question. I think you have to be honest with people. I think you have to say to them that having 169 different municipalities, be they towns or cities, whatever they are, with completely different education systems may not be the smartest thing that we could do. I think you have to say to people that there are things that we have to do as a state that don't allow you to be as independent as you've always been. Connecticut is last or fourth from last in the nation, depending on which measure you look at, if you're talking about race or you're talking about economics in terms of the achievement gap. That's not acceptable. And I think the legislature has to act as though it's not acceptable and say to those people who, yes, put us in office that I was put in office to do a job, and that job is not to allow the children of this state to fail. And, you know, we talk about the achievement gap, and we talk about race and economics, but what we don't talk about are even those kids at the top aren't doing as well as kids are doing in other places. And so how do you do it? You have to be a legislator who does what the job requires you to do, and that's look at the state, not just your individual municipality. That's a tough thing to ask people whose mindset has been, yes, I'm a part of that collective body, but before I'm a part of that collective body, I come from that place that put me there. But that is the conversation we have to have, and that's the conversation I'm hoping to be a part of.
I want to ask you before I forget about this, one of the big issues that you've been known for is trying to abolish the death penalty. Mm-hmm. Last session, it looked as though you were coming very close, and then Edith Prague changed her mind on her vote, and it really had to do, she told us, with her feelings about the home invasion in Cheshire and about the man who was a victim who lost his family. And she said, I cannot do that to him. Yes. How much of a blow was that to you, and what do you intend to do about it this session?
Not a question I expected. But it's a very good question, and actually I think it can relate in some ways to what we're talking about education. So let me say this. I think I was, when I came into the legislature, I was one of a few people who believed we could abolish the death penalty, particularly with me as a first-term legislator taking up the issue. Last year, after the success we had, I think I was one of a few people who thought we were in some deep, deep trouble. And I thought we were in deep trouble because, one, those people who were opponents of my position recognized that the death penalty abolition bill had moved. They also recognized that we had in place a governor who, if we were able to move the death penalty abolition bill, would sign the bill. And so their efforts would be at least redoubled. And so I thought we were in deep trouble. And I expected them to do everything, including using this Dr. Pettit's story to get legislators to back off. So it wasn't as much of a blow to me as I think it would have been if I weren't prepared. What are we going to do this session? We're going to go out and educate people. We are going to talk to legislators. We are going to go and find allies in their cities to let them know that there are people within their cities or towns who want them to abolish the death penalty. And we're going to tell people the truth. People have been talking about, well, the polls say that the people of Connecticut want the death penalty to remain intact, and they're absolutely correct. If you only ask the question, that is, do you want the death penalty or no death penalty? But when you ask the question that's actually before the state, do you want the death penalty or life without the possibility of parole, then the state is actually split, dead even. And so we're going to educate people so that when we have these discussions, we have honest discussions. We have discussions that are based on the facts before us. Now, how does that relate to, how does this issue of the death penalty relate to what we're talking about? I think the death penalty is an issue that is about justice, and justice doesn't change regardless of my circumstance or anyone else's circumstance. It doesn't mean we don't take it into account, but justice does not change. And in 1987, the Supreme Court of the United States said to us, here's justice for you. There was a study that was brought to the Supreme Court wherein they demonstrated that there is racial bias in the death penalty. And the Supreme Court, recognizing it, said, we will not disagree with you. But what we have to say to you is this. When there is this racial bias, unless you can prove that there is intention behind it, you can prove it happens. You can prove it happens over and over again. Unless there's intention, then it's fine to have that racial bias. Well, that doesn't sound like justice to me. And I think you always have to be fighting for justice. So when I look at the achievement gap, we have known for a long time that there is a difference between those at the top and the bottom of the economic scale before we had a conversation about the 99%, before we knew what any Occupy anything was. We have known for a long time that not only is there that component, but there's a completely independent racial variable. And so people have to be fighting against that. They have to be fighting for justice. And the reality is, until this state was embarrassed, not all of us were doing that.